The building that was once called home had been wrecked, almost unrecognizable, and the moon in the sky silently witnessed it all. The air was filled with the odors of mud and ash, and the scent of a flowering plant named Rosemary being slightly burnt. The 3 hideous lacerations on her chest looked like scores by a claw, while the rain-diluted blood formed a puddle. The rain kept pouring down on her, mercilessly taking away her remaining body temperature, but the girl did not care. She begged in a hoarse voice to the moon.
请救救我们，求求你，请至少让小乔
还活着，真的还活着。
老师，
是我，没错，是我。谢谢，你还活着，谢谢。对不起，对不起，对不起。如果我能更早发现的话。
老师，不用道歉，我是不会原谅你的。但是，如果你真的想要拯救什么人的话，请答应我，救救小乔，救救乔弗利。记住你的承诺，老师，这是约定，也是诅咒。
我答应，哪怕是用我的灵魂与恶魔做交换，我也一定会让他以人类的身份死去。一定。
The girl then fell soundlessly into eternal slumber.
我叫柯南道尔，本职是一名医生。此刻我正穿过自家诊所的客厅，循着楼梯向2楼的书房走去。
In the next scene, we are introduced to Conan Doyle, who is a doctor, novelist, and detective, as he walks up the stairs to meet a very special guest that is neither friend nor informant, but someone that had experienced a perilous journey with him not long ago. After he turns the door handle, the scene changes to the start of that journey.
福尔摩斯和华生，既然是纪传性质的小说，你又为何一定要使用如此奇怪的化名？
Conan Doyle and his partner, Hwa, are discussing his novel while they ride the train to their destination, and a more thorough introduction for Conan Doyle is given. Other than being a novelist, he had taken on 2 other roles in his life, however this so-called main profession as a doctor can barely pay the bills. Despite this, his job as a detective pays handsomely, and as they had solved a myriad of cases so far, more and more commissions had been entrusted to them. During his spare time, he wrote down his adventure stories based on the cases he solved, which then got posted off to a publisher by his landlady without consulting him. Thus, he became a novelist.
喂，已经可以看到了。
The desolate city called St. Fountainhead came into view. Had it not been for the unexplained cataclysm that happened 5 years ago, it might still be a lively holiday resort, but now it's just a dead city with severe Honkai pollution. To prevent the disaster from spreading, Lab 42 of Sheiksel Imperial Institute built a security system in the city named Anti-Entropy. The commission they're currently on came from this very research base stationed on the front line of the calamity. Conan Doyle then takes out their mysterious invitation and recites what's written. Though the letter claimed to have been written by Welch Joyce, it's apparent that it was written by a female. As Conan silently recites the last line of the poem, someone in the corner of the carriage caught his eye.
重新自我介绍一下，我叫艾琳·艾德勒，和瓦尔特先生乃是旧友。此番也与2位一样，受邀前往瓦尔特庄园拜访。往后还要请2位多多关照，合作愉快，华生医生。
Strangely, when they arrived, no one came to pick them up, so Irene volunteered to lead them to Weld Manor. On the way, they are attacked by Honkai beasts, leading them to assume that something had happened to the security system. After a sudden howl, they investigate the commotion and find Tesla in a pinch. They save her, and introduce themselves. As this isn't a good place for a conversation, Tesla tells them she'll take them to Weld Manor in her car. Soon after, a building resembling a church came into view. Hwa says it doesn't look like a research institute, and Tesla mentions that the manor used to be a Sheiksel church. She doesn't go into further details, and they leave the car in silence. As they pass through the courtyard, Irene notices a peculiar scent. Tesla explains that when they first arrived here 5 years ago, they found a clump of rosemary with violet blooms in the ruins. Weld considered it a miracle, had someone transplant the rosemary here, and gradually, it grew all over the courtyard. They then entered the building where Einstein had been waiting. After exchanging greetings, Conan notices that Irene did indeed seem close with the owner. They then discuss the failing security system. Einstein and Tesla bring up that the system has 3 pivot nodes which can withstand attacks of Honkai beasts below Emperor class, and are all required to fail for the beasts to enter the safe zone. As Honkai beasts do not possess such intelligence, Einstein could only think of the phantom as the culprit, but quickly dismisses it, and the topic ends. She then turns her attention to Conan Doyle, but when he mentions Mr. Joyce, Einstein delivers the shocking news that Walt Joyce, the owner of this place, is dead. However, it seems Dr. Conan Doyle isn't surprised. Before Conan had heard that news, he had presumed that Joyce had been in some kind of unavailable situation. As for the one who wrote the invitation, it was Tesla. 2 days ago, Walt had been murdered in his room and the poem they received had been copied from the scene. Walt's murder also came with other troubles. Einstein leads the group into a hall that resembles a Roman amphitheater where several odd-looking strangers were. They are Jackal, Raven, Sora, and Joffrey Joyce, and they are here for Walt's legacy. Jackal and Raven are the young lady's tutor and bodyguard. Although Jackal is also a researcher, she only had a cooperative relationship with the Institute. As for Raven, she used to be a mercenary, and about Sora, the two scientists haven't a clue. The last one to be introduced is Joffrey, aka Joey, the only direct descendant of Walt Joyce, and one of the two legal heirs to the legacy. The other being the young lady mentioned earlier. Tesla, who had been contacted by Joachim, tells them that they should be arriving soon. Einstein then tells Tesla to look into the cause of the malfunction. While there's still time, Conan Doyle asks Tesla about the Phantom of St. Fountain. Tesla says that though they can't draw any conclusions, they did see this phantom on the monitors, to which Einstein had suspected to have a certain level of intelligence. Tesla then brings up that Lab 42 only has 4 researchers, Walt, his assistant Joachim, Einstein, and herself. However, an elite Valkyrie squad had been dispatched to assist them. A week ago, they went on a mission to capture the phantom, and have been missing ever since. Worried about the two who haven't arrived, and wanting to check on the nearest pivot node along the way, Tesla borrows Hwa. Now on to Einstein. Irene mentions how she showed hostility towards Jackal and Raven when she mentioned the legacy. Einstein explains that Walt made a sloppy will in which he left his estate to his daughter and son. However, before they reach adulthood, their bequeathments will be kept by their respective designated guardians. To their relief, the designated guardian of Lady Bronya, a survivor of the cataclysm who Walt adopted, is Joachim, Walt's assistant. Joachim used to be Bronya's tutor, but as the frequent travel between St. Fountain and the city where she's kept was too exhausting, Jackal, with her questionable background, became the current tutor. Walt's will did not mention the proportions of the legacy that his son and daughter could receive, and, upon news of his death, Jackal came here with the bodyguard. Einstein is worried that the young lady might be abetted by ill-intentioned outsiders. That said, this is a family matter, and all Einstein wants from Dr. Conan Doyle is to find out the murderer. At the crime scene, the moment Conan Doyle entered the room, he smelled a pleasant fragrance. Everything is neat and tidy except the 2 alarming pools of blood on the floor. Conan Doyle tells Einstein that he'd like to do his own investigating before hearing the facts. During the investigation, Conan discovers a photo of Walt and Joffrey. However, something about it seemed unnatural. Joffrey's eyes were dull, and it was as if the velvet chair he sat on was propping him up. Later, with his investigation complete, Conan Doyle is ready to hear the details of the murder. 2 days ago, 7:15 p.m., the 2 scientists went to see Walt to report work, but when they knocked on his door, they couldn't get a response. Walt sounded like he was on the phone with someone, so they decided to come back later, but at around 7:40, a thump came from his room. They went to his room and found him lying in a pool of blood with a sharp wound on his back. There was another wounded man in the room, and the dagger that killed Walt was sticking in that man's back, who they discovered to be Grey Serpent, a notorious intel dealer. They left the room in a hurry to treat Walt, but he didn't make it, and when they returned to the room, Grey Serpent was gone. As Grey Serpent might still be lurking around, Conan Doyle suggests that they gather everyone. Suddenly, a blackout. When the lights came back, they learned that Sora was nowhere to be found. However, Fu Hua was back, along with 2 new faces. Bronya, Walt's adopted daughter, and Joachim, Walt's assistant. Tesla had left to repair the electricity. Hearing Conan Doyle mention that Sora could have been taken outside, Raven wants to leave, but Conan manages to convince her to stay by suggesting that Sora might still be inside since the mansion is huge. Then came Einstein's voice from the 2nd floor, and everyone looked in the direction she indicated. After checking her vital signs, Conan Doyle confirms that Jackal is indeed dead. Tesla then arrives, and together, everyone is updated on the situation. Tesla reveals that the blackout was caused by a simple timing device, and Conan Doyle then asks if anyone was talking to Jackal when the blackout occurred. Unexpectedly, Joey, who had always been silent, pointed at Raven. This leads to Tesla suspecting Raven, but Joey defends her. Both Raven's and Joey's testimonies suggest that the murderer isn't one of the guests. Conan Doyle is lost in thought when suddenly, a strange feeling started to encroach his senses, and he fell into a deep dream in which he smelled a somehow nostalgic, floral scent. The next thing he knew, his body felt unexpectedly heavy. Trapped in this eerie, uncanny state, she appeared. She looked misty and translucent, and she begged for help, but all of a sudden, her will went through a radical change, and she was no longer calling for help. Instead, she's on the attack, but Conan's body is still immobile. Fortunately, Irene is somehow here to save the day. When Conan Doyle woke, he found that time had hardly passed and an almost imperceptible smile flickered on Irene's face. The next stage takes us back in time to Hwa's perspective. Hwa had just been assigned the job to guard Tesla as they investigate the nearest pivot node and pick up the two guests, Bronya and her guardian Joachim. Tesla tells Hwa that Bronya is the only survivor of the cataclysm among the orphans taken in by the church. Apparently, the church was quite renowned for taking in many orphans from different places. This will be the first time Bronya returns to Saint Fountain after the cataclysm. Hwa then asks about Joachim. Tesla says that Joachim had been living in Saint Fountain longer than anyone in their lab, and had been running the church and caring for the orphans before the cataclysm. Tesla describes Joachim as a knowledgeable biologist, yet in some ways, unbelievably naive. Oftentimes she sees him muttering to himself before the flowers in the yard. Hwa points out that Tesla seems to care a lot about him, to which she denies. Outside, unable to get in touch with their guests, they attempt to track them down, but the rain and Honkai interference made it difficult. As they started feeling helpless, Hwa caught a glimpse of a surreal glow that looked like a bird. Following the bird, they encountered more and more Honkai beasts, which led Tesla to conclude that it may be pointless to check up on the pivot node. Ruling out the Phantom, Tesla suspects human sabotage with Jackal as the lead suspect, but is unable to figure out the connection between Jackal breaking the security system and using Bronya to get Welt's legacy. She claims that what Jackal covets is Welt's research data, since after all, from what Tesla heard, Jackal used to conduct human experiments. Suddenly, the sound of explosions. They find Bronya and Joachim in the middle of a fight, and Bronya's legs have been injured. While in the fight, Hwa realizes that physical blows can't hurt the thing, but tells Tesla and Joachim to hide while she protects Bronya. Tesla warns Hwa to be careful, as that thing is the Phantom of Saint Fountain. Eventually, Hwa manages to shake off the Phantom and reunite with the group. However, Hwa suddenly felt a hint of menace, and an eerie shadow suddenly emerged out of thin air behind Bronya. Joachim darted between the monster and Bronya, shielding Bronya with his body. Surprisingly, the Phantom's razor-sharp claws paused in midair, and for a moment, Hwa seemed to have seen a glimmer of humanity in its eyes. It staggered back, howled in confusion, and, after letting out a mournful cry, vanished in the rain. After the Phantom disappeared, the rest of the Honkai beasts scattered and fled. In the next scene, Joachim and Tesla are bickering about Jackal, and it seems that the research data they want may have something to do with reviving the dead. It wasn't until Bronya spoke up that the bickering stopped, and they decided to head toward the manor, but Tesla noticed something strange. The manor's power system had failed. Back to the present, after Conan Doyle had awoken from his dream, the group is examining the crime scene. Next to the body was a word written in blood that didn't look like it could have been written by Jackal. The group ponders on what it means until Einstein reveals that it's German for revenge. As Conan Doyle mumbled to himself, Hwa examined Jackal's body and noticed a deep dagger wound on Jackal's back. Hwa then helped move Jackal's body to the basement, and when she returned, she learned that Raven had left to search for Sora in the manor. Meanwhile, the group decided to prioritize restoring the security system to ensure a safe zone, and so, the group split into two. One to stay in search of Grey Serpent and Sora, the other to fix the nodes. On the repair team are Tesla, Bronya, and Hwa. While Tesla prepares, Conan Doyle and Irene both comment about Raven, and Einstein reveals she investigated Raven's past, and discovered that after Raven retired, she adopted multiple orphans using the money she earned as a mercenary. Tesla, with the prepping finally done, shoves a transceiver into Conan Doyle's hand, and the repair team leaves. And now, the search for Sora in the manor begins. Einstein suggests they go to the second floor, as Raven should have already covered the basement and first floor, but it seemed Raven had acted faster than they expected, and most of the rooms were already wide open. They follow the corridor to the last room where Welt took his last breath, and there, they find Raven smashing her fist against the wall. Conan Doyle calls out to her, and, as if startled by his presence, Raven suddenly turns and grabs him by the collar. He attempts to calm her down, and it starts to work, until Einstein's words cut into Raven like a knife, fueling her rage even more. Raven launches an attack at Einstein, but Miss Adler blocked it from the side. Meanwhile, Einstein fell upon the bookshelf. Just then, a pile of paper notes neatly stapled together caught Miss Adler's eyes. As she bent down to pick them up, Conan Doyle noticed a brief moment of hesitation on Einstein's face. Irene hands the notes over to Conan Doyle, calling it a lead coming from nowhere. The title of the notes read, Investigations on the Saint Fountain Catastrophe, by Welt Joyce. The notes describe how Welt felt obligated to take responsibility after the forbidden experiments bore fruit, and his search for two missing kids, whom he only found one of. Somehow, he discovered Grey Serpent, a broker who supplied orphan children, and a lead to others involved. Having finished reading, Conan Doyle asks Einstein for an explanation, but she tells him now isn't the right time, as searching for Sora is of higher priority, and it's established that Grey Serpent isn't in the manor. As Joachim is busy with phantom data and Einstein has to stay close to Joey, Conan Doyle, Irene, and Raven are put in the search team, but before they move out, Raven wants to have a word with Conan. Raven hands him the address to the Roost, an orphanage facility she founded, and tells him to find a suitable owner for it should she meet her end. She confirms Welt's notes to be true, revealing that her job was to deliver the suitable materials, sourced by Grey Serpent, to the church. It's also revealed that Jackal was the one running the human experiments, but Joachim, who was managing the church back then, had been kept in the dark until the thing happened. Raven believes that Grey Serpent killed Welt because Welt had some dirt on him, and afterwards, decided to tie up loose ends, resulting in the kidnapping of Sora so he could get to Raven. Outside, Joachim joins the search team, but before Conan Doyle could turn on the transceiver, wild Honkai beasts appear. Meanwhile, Raven, who seemed to have noticed something, left the team. After they dealt with the Honkai beasts, they get a call from Tesla. Next stage, perspective is swapped to the other team to when Tesla had rebooted the first node. The group is about to move on, but Bronya is distracted by the cut on the node. Due to Bronya's interest in mechanical engineering, she notices that the cut on the node seemed to have come from firearms instead of Honkai beasts. The same kind of cut is also found on the second node. As they near the final node, Hua finds the unbelievably clear area where the node is to be abnormal, and insists that Tesla stay behind while she scouts ahead. Bronya also went with Hua, and soon, they run into a hostile prototype Sentinel system. They manage to disable it, but are flashbanged and ambushed. The search team catches up to Tesla, and are then informed that Fu Hua and Bronya had been ambushed by the missing Valkyrie squad. Though the reasons for the squad's hostility is unknown, Tesla expresses concern for their lives, but Irene tells her not to worry as she happens to know a few tricks that can manipulate people's minds, and can paralyze them without hurting them. Irene takes the stage and with her help, they subdue the missing Valkyrie squad, but soon discover a trail of dead Valkyries. They also saw Sora not far from them, but after they made it to the corner, the horrible view that greeted them was beyond words. In the direction Sora faced was Raven's cold body, and on the wall Raven leaned against was the word Ratch, written in fresh blood. There was another body lying at her feet. It was Grey Serpent, and he was also dead. As for Sora, she was in a trance, her face was devoid of any motion, and, as if she was a soulless puppet, raindrops kept hitting her eyes, yet she didn't even blink.